She got in because her feet hurt. That was the whole of it. Not fate, not the particular arrangement of the universe into something meaningful. Just 340 steps from the elevator to the curb in heels she had worn, because Tuesday had been supposed to end at 6, and it was now past midnight, and her feet had stopped communicating with her in the language of discomfort, and moved directly into something she could only describe as a formal complaint. The black car was at the curb. The black cars were always at the curb at this hour outside the Sianwu Group tower, because the people who stayed this late were the people who could afford not to think about how they got home, and Ray 1 had worked here long enough to have stopped registering which car belonged to whom. She pulled open the door. She got in. She exhaled in the specific way of someone whose body has been waiting for permission to stop performing. "Apgujeong," she said. "The side street behind the market? I'll tell you when to." She stopped. The man in the back seat was looking at her. Not her driver. Not anyone's driver. He was sitting against the far window in a charcoal jacket, with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled once at the cuff. And he was looking at her with the particular careful expression of someone who has just witnessed something unexpected and has not yet decided what to do about it. She knew his face. She knew it from the company directory, from the framed photograph on the 31st floor that she passed every time she went to the executive suite to deliver documents for her director, from the quarterly address that got streamed to every desk in the building and that she watched from her computer while eating lunch, and also finishing the Murray contract notes, because she could do both, and it seemed wasteful not to. Han Tae-yang, 41 years old, founder and CEO of Sianwu Group. The building she had just walked out of was one of 6 he owned in this city alone. She had been sitting in his car for approximately 9 seconds. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her hand found the door handle immediately. "I thought, I'm in the wrong car, I'm so sorry, which side street?" he said. She stopped with the handle in her grip. "Behind the market," he said. "In Apgujeong." He said it to the driver through the partition, a brief exchange she didn't fully catch, and the car pulled from the curb into the midnight street before she had completed the thought that would have resulted in getting out of it. She sat. The door handle was still under her fingers. Outside, Seoul moved past in its late-night configuration, the particular amber and white of a city that did not fully sleep, the street cleaners and the last buses and the restaurants still glowing at their windows. "I can call?" She started. "It's on the way," he said. He was looking at the window now, not at her, which she understood was a form of courtesy, giving her the space to compose herself, to stop being someone who had climbed into the wrong car and become, again, whatever she normally was. "You're from the Sianwu building. Legal support," she said. "4th floor. I'm Secretary Lim Ray 1. She said it automatically, the work voice, the one she had spent 4 years calibrating to the precise register of someone who was competent and present and not taking up more space than her job description allocated. He nodded once. "You were there late. The Hansung contract review." She paused. The draft that came back from their legal team had 3 clauses revised without notation. Standard practice on their end, apparently. Not standard for us to sign off on unnotated revisions without flagging them. He turned from the window. "Not all the way." "Enough. Who flagged them?" he said. "I did." She said it the way she said all accurate things, plainly, without adding the modifier that would soften it into something more acceptable. She had stopped adding the modifier approximately 2 years ago, when she had understood that the modifier was costing her more than it was protecting her. "Your directors signed off on the unnotated version." It was not a question. She looked at him for a moment, at the steady attention behind the careful expression, and understood that he already knew the shape of the situation, and was asking to find out whether she would tell him the true shape of it, or the managed version. "Yes," she said. "And you caught it after." "I catch most things after," she said. "The review process has a gap at the mid-level sign-off stage. Documents come through my desk after director approval and before they go upstairs, and I read everything that comes through my desk." "That's not in your job description." "No," she said. "It's in my judgment." The car moved through the intersection below Hannam Bridge, the river briefly visible to her left, black and silver under the bridge lights. She looked at it, and then back at her hands, which were in her lap holding nothing, because she had at some point released the door handle without noticing. "The Hansung clause," he said. "Which one?" "The indemnity cap in Section 9, she said. Their version changed the ceiling from the contracted figure to a percentage of the transaction value at settlement. The difference, depending on where the transaction settles, is between 40 million won and potentially 4 times that." Silence. "It was the second revision," she said. "The first one was in the IP warranty language. Subsection 6. Paragraph 2. They changed retain to acknowledge, which sounds like an editorial preference and is actually the difference between an obligation and a gesture." He was looking at her fully now, with the directness of someone who had stopped managing the angle of his attention and was simply paying it. She had been looked at like that twice in her professional life, once by her contract law professor at Sogang, who had handed back her final paper with a note that said, "This is the kind of reading that changes outcomes," and once by the senior partner at the firm where she had interned, who had offered her a position and who she had not been able to accept because her mother's health had required her to take something with more predictable hours, and she had ended up at Sionwoo Group and had been making the most of it ever since. "Both revisions," he said. "Both revisions," she confirmed. "I wrote it up and sent it to my director at 10:47. He's had it for an hour and 12 minutes. He hasn't responded." "He's responded," she said carefully. "He said he would look at it in the morning." The car turned onto the elevated road, and the city spread below them in both directions. The familiar disorienting beauty of Seoul from height, and Ray Won looked at it for a moment with the feeling she always had from elevated roads late at night, that the city was showing her something true about itself that it kept covered in the daytime. "You passed the bar," he said. She turned. "How do you? You're in legal support with a law degree from Sogang. Top of your year." He said it without the particular gentleness people sometimes deployed around this fact, as though it required cushioning. "You're not there because you couldn't do anything else." "No," she said. "Your mother." She looked at him. "You looked me up." "I look up everyone in the building eventually," he said. "I looked you up 8 months ago after the Dale contract issue." Ray Won was quiet for a moment. The Dale contract issue was what her director called it. What she called it, privately and only to herself, was the time she had caught a termination clause that would have allowed a counterparty to exit a 7-year agreement without penalty in the event of a market fluctuation that happened, by her calculation, on average, twice per decade. She had written it up. Her director had taken it upstairs. The revision had been made. Her name had not traveled with it. "My mother is better now," she said. "She has been for 2 years." "I know," he said. He said it without the trailing implication she sometimes encountered, the unspoken, "So then, why are you still?" The gentle pressure of the question people did not ask out loud, but carried visibly in their faces. He said it as a fact that completed itself without requiring her to justify anything around it. She looked at her hands again. The heels that had been the beginning of all this were on her feet still, and her feet had moved past the formal complaint into a kind of exhausted silence, and she thought about the 40-minute commute still ahead of her, and the draft she would need to look at again in the morning, and the Wednesday that was already technically in progress, and she felt, sitting in the back of the wrong car with the city going past and the CEO of her company 3 feet to her left, the specific weight of 4 years of being excellent in a room that did not have her name on the wall. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer it accurately rather than diplomatically." She almost smiled. "All right. Do you want to stay in legal support?" The accurate answer was immediate, and had been immediate for 2 years. "No," she said. "What do you want?" She had not said this out loud, not to anyone, not to her mother, who worried, not to her friend Shayon, who asked with the cheerful persistence of someone who believed that naming a thing brought it closer, not to herself in the explicit direct way that required full commitment to wanting something you might not get. "I want to be the person in the room who decides which contracts go forward," she said, "not the person who catches what the deciding people missed. I want to be the one who doesn't miss them in the first place." The car had slowed. She looked out the window and recognized the street behind the Apgujeong market, the familiar sequence of it. The dry cleaner, the old Pojangmacha that still had its cart chained to the post even at this hour, the narrow turn before her building. Her stop. The car did not stop. She looked at the driver, and then at the street moving past her window, and then at him. "There's a position," he said. "It doesn't exist yet because I haven't created it. And I haven't created it because I didn't have the person for it until approximately 15 minutes ago." He looked at her with the even directness she had stopped finding startling and started finding simply accurate. The face of a man who had decided something and was telling her the truth of it. In-house contract review lead, reporting directly to the general counsel. The function would be a new layer between director sign-off and final executive review. Everything that came through your desk in legal support, but with authority and attribution. She was quiet. "I'll have the structure documented by Friday," he said. "You can look at it and tell me what's wrong with it. Because there will be things wrong with it, and you'll find them." She looked at the street, at the market closed behind its metal shutters, at the ordinary nighttime of a neighborhood she had come home to for 3 years. She thought about accurate versus diplomatic and decided she was going to keep to the standard she had just been asked to meet. "My director," she said. "Will be managed," he said. Not unkindly. "Precisely, the Dale contract," she said. "My name wasn't on the revision. Your name will be on everything you originate from this point." She pressed her lips together for a moment. Not to stop herself from saying something, but to contain the size of the thing she was feeling, which was larger than the situation seemed to call for from the outside, and which she understood from the inside was not about the job title or the reporting structure, but about the specific, durable exhaustion of being exactly as good as you were, and having that goodness travel upward under someone else's name for 4 years. "I need to see the documentation," she said. "Friday," he said. "And I'll have questions. I'd be concerned if you didn't." The car had stopped, she realized. At some point in the last minute, the driver had pulled to the curb on her street, and she had not noticed because she had been looking at the man 3 feet away from her. And she looked now at the building through the window, the familiar entrance with the security light, the planter her neighbor kept that had been empty since October, the ordinary container of her ordinary life, waiting for her to come back to it. She looked at him. He was watching her with the same quality of attention he had brought to everything in the last 30 minutes. Not pressing, not performing patience, simply present. She understood, from everything she had observed, that this was simply how he was in a room. She found herself thinking about what that would mean across a table at 10 in the morning when she was presenting findings on a contract nobody had caught. and she found herself thinking, more quietly, about what it meant that he had looked her up 8 months ago and had known about Sogong and had asked for the accurate answer and had listened when she gave it. "The Hansung contract," she said. "I'll have someone else pull the full version tonight. The IP warranty language first," she said. Section 6. The word change is small, and the people reviewing it at the executive level may not, I understand, he said. "I'll read it tonight." She nodded. She reached for the door handle, the same motion she had reached for it before, and this time she opened it, and the night air came in cold and smelling of the market 2 blocks over, the nighttime smell of the city doing its overnight work. She got out. She stood on the pavement. She bent down and looked at him through the open door. "Friday," she said. "Friday," he said. She straightened. She closed the door. She stood on the pavement of her street at midnight, in the heels that had been the beginning of everything, and watched the car move to the end of the block and turn. And she stood there for a moment longer than she needed to, because she was doing what she always did with things that required accuracy. She was holding it still long enough to look at it clearly before she decided what it was. She had caught the clauses at 10:47. She had gotten into the wrong car at midnight. Between those 2 things and Friday there was a documentation she had not seen yet, and a position that did not exist yet, and a man who had said your name will be on everything you originate from this point, with the same quality of flatness he used for facts. She turned and walked to her building. Inside, she took off the heels at the door. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop and pulled up the Hansung contract draft and read it again from the beginning, not because she expected to find more, but because she did not leave things at probably fine when certainly fine was available. At 1:43 she found a 3rd revision. It was in the governing law clause, deeply technical, the kind of change that required 3 readings and a working knowledge of international arbitration procedure to catch. She wrote it up in the same format as the other 2, plain and specific, the way she wrote all true things. She looked at the write-up for a moment. She forwarded it directly to the email address she had looked up in the company directory. The general inbox that she knew from 4 years in the building would be triaged by someone tonight, because the building did not entirely sleep. She typed in the subject line, 3rd revision, Hansung, Section 14. Lim Ray 1, legal support. Her name. In the subject line, not at the bottom of a memo that would travel upward under someone else's. There, at the front, the first thing read. She pressed send. She closed the laptop. She sat in her kitchen with her tea going cold and the city quiet outside, her window, and the feeling that she had set something in motion by getting into the wrong car and had set something else in motion just now by putting her name first, and both of those things were irrevocable in the way that accurate things were always irrevocable once they had been said out loud. She thought she had gotten into the wrong car because her feet hurt. She thought some mistakes were not mistakes at all, just doors that looked like wrong turns from the outside and opened once you were through them, into the room where your name was finally on the wall. She went to bed. She had a Friday to prepare for.